Hello and welcome to Reporters here on Phosphate Cap, the programme which showcases some of the best stories from our correspondents around the world. Well, this week we bring you a tale of two cities, Limerick in Ireland and Łódź in Poland, both in the European Union and both hugely affected by the economic crisis, but in very different ways. Well, nearly everyone in Limerick works or knows someone who works for Dell. The US computer giant's been there for years, but it's leaving town in a bid to save money and moving its European manufacturing base to the Polish city of Łódź. Costs there are cheaper, and it's been offered generous EU incentives as Brussels props up the bloc's newest members. So while the unemployment queues get longer in Limerick, Łódź is basking in a boom. Phosphate Cat's Mary McCarthy and James Andre bring us this special report.
This factory is in its dying days. In April, Dell will shut down here, laying off 1,900 people. The production lines are heading to Poland. A brutal departure, and that Dell has always boasted about record productivity here. Since setting up in Limerick 19 years ago, Dell has received over 53 million euros in state aid. We aren't allowed to visit the plant. Dell likes to keep its secrets, and it doesn't like trade unions. Indeed, Dell management has never recognized unions. These workers are holding a first meeting with lawyers. Their goal? Negotiate a better severance package. Thanks to a petition, they've managed to increase the maximum payout from 1 to 2 years of salary. But they say that's not enough. After an hour, the workers issue their first statement.
The general body of the workers are most aggrieved by what's been offered to them to date, especially having regard to the fact that Dell is a €65 billion company.
Dell has been making big profits, but rumors of a factory closing had been rampant for months. The announcement still came as a surprise to the 1,900 workers suddenly out of a job.
It's a disappointment, in the way, just for the company to up and go, that when they were doing so well, we were the flagship for 20 years, and for this just to come all of a sudden, it was, shock.
So when it came, we were obviously shocked. We were stunned.
The Dell workers are afraid to speak. Dell has threatened employees who talk to the media, saying they risk getting sacked without their severance package. For Limerick, Dell's departure is a devastating blow. Its suppliers are also packing up for Poland, which means at least 10,000 jobs are going to disappear in a city of about 100,000 people. Dell's flight couldn't have come at a worse time. The region was already hard hit by the economic downturn. The number of people asking for unemployment benefits has risen by 74%.
Yeah, it's changed drastically. I've never seen a queue like this. It reminds me of something from the 30s in America. Perhaps we'll have soup kitchens next.
The hours have been reduced from 5 days a week to 1. So basically, now I have no work.
O'Connell Street, Limerick's main thoroughfare. Businesses shut down, spaces to rent. The Celtic Tiger has come and gone in this historically poor city. To Mayor John Gilligan, the situation is headed from bad to catastrophic, and he lays the blame squarely on Dell.
People suspected, that Dell were going to close down, and they always denied that up to the very last week, is that people wouldn't have done things like taking out mortgages. They wouldn't have taken out big loans on cars. Now they find that they've been buying their houses at the top end of the market, and now without a job, there's always a chance they could be homeless as well, and they feel very, very aggrieved about that.
When the Celtic Tiger was in full swing, Limerick was a hot destination for immigrants. Many Poles moved here in 2004 as soon as Poland joined the EU. They now make up 10% of the population, but in these hard times, they're often the first to lose their jobs. This language school offers English classes specially adapted for Poles.
No, this pencil is green. Which pencil is grey? This pencil is grey.
Until now, Poles had been welcomed by the local community. But since Dell announced that it's heading for Poland, tension has emerged.
Taking from, yes, taking from. Okay, Łukasz.
obviously people would pronounce some words that maybe are not so fortunate, like go back to Poland or go back to your country, whatever country that is. But that's understandable because there's a lot of grief around, around losing jobs.
Discrimination, unemployment, many Polish immigrants are starting to think it's time to head home.
I know 14 or 15 people who've gone back to Poland because they couldn't find work.
Artur and Kinga live in this bungalow in a Limerick suburb. The young couple moved to a booming Ireland 4 years ago. Their son was born here. His grandmother came over as well. Then, crisis hit.
Me and my wife, we were working, and now my wife lost job, and you know, there is no point to come to live here. You know, just I'm working and she's not working, and at the moment we are thinking about coming back to Poland, and in the near future we have an interview about job in Poland. And
Kinga's job interview is with a Dell supplier leaving Limerick for Poland. In Warsaw's financial district, a Dell spokesperson has agreed to discuss the move out of Limerick. Closing the Irish plant, he says, is about trimming costs.
This is a part of the 3 billion cost-saving plan. And yes, after evaluation, all the little things, we decided to do it. It's a very difficult decision, especially when we have to tell people that they will lose their jobs.
It's here in the city of Łódź, in a factory built in 2006, that Dell will now produce all of its products for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. It's 10 p.m. and workers are heading home. For them, Dell's arrival is a lucky break.
I have 2 kids, and my husband and I lost our jobs at Bosch at the same time because of the economic crisis. Both of us managed to get jobs here.
Are the salaries higher?
Yes, I'm satisfied.
Much higher?
Yes, much higher.
It's really a big challenge for me. It's a position with a lot of responsibility. Before I had jobs where I didn't need much training. Here you have to be very involved, very alert. You have to pay attention to every last detail.
It's boom time in Łódź. After the textile industry collapsed at the end of communism, the city launched a massive program to attract foreign investment. Dell's factory is located in a special economic zone on the outskirts of the city. One of many multinationals that have chosen Łódź, the financial incentives make it an ideal spot for them to set up shop.
The tax reduction granted by the Polish government can reach up to 70% of what a company invests.
Dell took advantage of those tax credits, and it also negotiated infrastructure such as roads and fences financed by the city and the EU. And it doesn't stop there. The Polish government offered Dell an additional 52 million euros in state aid. For now, that money has been blocked by the European Commissioner for Competition. But the local European MP is lobbying for Dell to get its money.
Dell made us think that perhaps it would decide against a new production line, at the least, or even close the factory. And when the decision to close the Limerick plant was announced, we were told that the choice was not between Limerick and Łódź, between Ireland and Poland. The choice was between the European Union and elsewhere, 2 new factories in Malaysia and China. So I think this is good for the EU, for its common market, that the factory stays here.
Since Poland joined the EU in 2004, Łódź has been transformed. Some 2 billion euros of European funds are being injected into the region. Unemployment has dropped from 20% to just 7%. The mayor's office has been hunting foreign investors.
We put money where we know we can find investors. We've sent teams to Japan, Korea, Taiwan. It works really well with Asian investors. They really appreciate the direct contact. It wouldn't have been easy or obvious for them to come to Łódź on their own.
Manufaktura, the pride and joy of Łódź, a brand new shopping mall built in the city's old textile mills, a temple to modern shopping culture. We met Arek, who has just returned to Łódź after living in Limerick for 3 years. He's surprised how much his country has changed.
More expensive is life here now. In 2004, food was cheaper, lots of things was cheaper. Now it's like our island, approximately.
The average Pole makes just a third of the typical Irish salary, just €400 per month, which doesn't go far in a mall like this, where prices are just as high as in Western Europe. Change is coming fast for Poles. Amelia works at the Dell plant. Even though her wages are better than average, it's still tough to make ends meet. She lives with her son, husband, and in-laws in this communist-era apartment, and she doesn't believe that multinationals have done much for Łódź.
It's clear that there are more jobs in Łódź. Financially, things are better. But with the economic crisis, multinationals are laying people off. Or they exploit you to the point that you have no personal life. At Dell, they're the first to do that.
Amelia's mother-in-law sees her working hard, but knows she can't afford her own apartment.
In the past, it was easier. You had a stable job, stable income, and you could put money aside. It was easier before. Now life is hard.
After the sudden shutdown in Limerick, many Dell workers in Łódź feel their own jobs are not secure.
There's a rumor in the factory saying they might be looking in Belarus. Of course, they will leave. Polish people want to make as much as in the more developed countries. Further east, people are willing to work for half our salaries.
That's the question that everyone is asking. How long before Dell gets a better offer elsewhere? Will the Polish tiger suffer the same fate as the Celtic one?
Well, joining me in the studio is reporter behind that story, Mary McCarthy. Mary, in this story, I mean, it's a fascinating story, as we say, of two cities. Is Poland the new Ireland?
Yes, Natasha, in many ways, indeed it is, because in Ireland 20 years ago we had this cocktail of EU funds, low corporate taxes, which came in that attracted multinationals from the pharmaceutical sector and especially from the computer industry, as we saw in our report, that transformed what was a poor agricultural economy into a global powerhouse. That's exactly what we're seeing today in Poland, which is really booming. Now, of course, Ireland also had other advantages at the time that pulled those companies in. Those were mostly demographic. They had a young, highly educated population, and Poland has those advantages today as well, in addition to some other advantages. Namely, it has a population that's 10 times bigger than that of Ireland, and it also has a key geographic location right at the heart of the Eurasian continent. So we could say it's the Celtic tiger model, but on a bigger scale with bigger potential.
So looking at Ireland, I mean, would it be fair to say that perhaps Ireland made some mistakes?
Indeed, all the experts we spoke to, the officials we spoke to in Poland said until very recently they were saying Poland wants to be the new Ireland. Let's base our model for our economy on what Ireland has done. Now suddenly they're saying let's keep doing that, but let's learn from the mistakes that Ireland has made. As we know, Ireland, it's in the headlines every day, is in crisis just like many countries around the world. Their housing market has collapsed. The financial crisis has hit very hard. So what are the mistakes that Poland can learn from? If we look specifically at the example of Dell, we see the fragility of the Irish economy. Dell accounts for 5% of Ireland's GDP, 10% of its exports, almost 10% of its exports. Now, one question that begs is, should the Irish government have have allowed its economy to become so dependent on a company without in turn asking for some responsibility, some corporate responsibility, saying to Dell, well, let's get some guarantees you're going to stick around for a while. And indeed, that's not what the Irish government is doing. What they've been doing until very recently is handing over money to Dell in continued state aid. Another key question is the one being asked by the Limerick workers who have been laid off, is that should we be allowing these multinational companies to come in and say you have the right to not allow unions in your factories, which is indeed what Dell did, and those factory workers are kicking themselves now for letting that happen.
And what role exactly has the European Union played in this move from Ireland to Poland?
Well, basically, 20 years ago, the EU played a key, if indirect, role in helping Dell to set up in Ireland. Now we see that same situation playing out today in Poland, where the EU is, we could say, holding Dell's hand, supporting, encouraging this move to Poland. Meanwhile, back in Ireland, we have the European government right now going to Brussels, going to the European Union, and asking for emergency funds. It's part of what's called the European Globalization Fund, money that would go to the laid-off workers back in Ireland. So there's sort of a paradox here, because on the one hand you have the European funds supporting this move, on the other hand you have basically Ireland trying to get the EU to pay to clean up the mess left behind back in Ireland. And it really raises a lot of questions about whether this is an efficient, indeed an ethical use of the European Union's money, which is in the end all of our money.
All right, Mary McCarthy, thank you very much indeed for that fascinating look at a tale of two cities, a tale of two countries, but both in the European Union. That's all we have time for this week on Reporters. Do join us, though, next time.